Welcome to the next lesson in Mesopotamia, Mesopotamian Accomplishments. All right, so technology. Technology is the skills and knowledge to make products or meet goals. All right, so in the Stone Age, the technology was a bow and arrow. They created a bow and arrow in order to be able to hunt, and so they would be able to eat. In Mesopotamia, technology was the wheel. They did not have this before Mesopotamia, so they needed to find ways to get around and how to move heavy things with less effort, and they created the wheel. Today, we have iPods. iPods are used to solve the problem of not wanting to carry a boombox on your shoulder for the rest of your life to listen to music, so you use an iPod that can hold thousands and thousands of songs and actually fit in your pocket. So as you can see, it's pretty amazing how technology has changed over the years and what we were able to accomplish, all because before us, people created these things. Innovation. Innovation is a new way of doing things. So in the Stone Age, again, the new way of hunting was to use a bow and arrow. And in Mesopotamia, it was to use the wheel to move things and to get around. And then now the iPod to carry around information, songs, games, all of those types of things within your pocket. So a new way of doing things is what we are talking about when we talk about innovation. All right, all technology is created in order to solve a problem. So before we had the problem of flooding. Every year the river would flood, crops and cities would be destroyed, and lives would be lost. The solution? Levees. The ways of life changed. One, people no longer had to worry about their river flooding in some areas and could live closer to the river. Two, crops could be planted near the river in fertile soil. So they were able to use that fertile soil and that fertile land without the fear of the river taking over and taking people's lives and the crops. Problem, water is far away from the city-states. Solution, some city-states are miles away from the river and it's tough to get water to them. So the solution was canals. Hey, we worked on this in our project in class and talked about how canals made it so that way the water could get from the river back to the city-states. So canals definitely changed the Mesopotamian way of life. We talked about this before, because now water can be brought to the crops year-round, meaning people can farm year-round, which means that there was a surplus of food and led to the division of labor, because now not everybody has to farm. People who are not very good at being farmers were able to go on and be something else, working with law enforcement or working with being a doctor or anything that would not involve being a farmer. So you did not have to always be a farmer, because now a few people could do it year-round and other people could focus on other tasks. So canals really changed the way of life in Mesopotamia in regards to jobs and what people were responsible for doing. All right, so now a problem that we haven't talked about, but a problem of transportation. So imagine that you're taking, a lot of your stuff by foot, and the only way to get around is to walk or to ride an animal. And you have to think, animals weren't tame like we have now. They're wild animals that are not the easiest to hop onto and ride around. So if you need to get water from the river and you need to bring it back, you are carrying it no matter how far it is. You are carrying it from where the water is to your city-state. Solution, the wheel. Right, so the wheel is something today that we really take for granted. Wheels will go on our cars and get us from point A to point B. They're on your bicycles. They are actually part of what helps us be able to move crates around, because we put wheels underneath it. The wheel is actually an amazing invention. Simple in concept, but it took a while to get to the point where we figured out that a wheel in a round-shaped stone would help us get things from point A to point B, and to do so much faster. So the ways the wheels changed life was people can go places faster and farther than before, And people can carry things with them that makes travel a lot easier. So it was easier to get things from point A to point B. It was easier to move food. It was easier to bring things that you needed to trade or to sell. It was easier to take them to the market because you didn't have to carry them. So now you could actually take more of what you wanted to trade and sell and be more profitable. The next problem, communication. The only way to communicate is through speech. But the problem here is there's so many different languages spoken. There's so many different languages spoken today. However, we're able to figure out how to communicate with one another because we're learning those languages or we have writing. Right? So written language. Written language made it easier to communicate faster, easier, and with less confusion. It was easier to keep accurate records. So now that there's a way to write it down, it's easier to translate written language or to use pictures to figure out what people are talking about, as opposed to trying to figure out what they're saying. Because a lot of times, if you are not familiar with the language, there really is no connection between what that person is saying and what you're thinking they're saying or what you understand as words. It's almost like sitting down and talking to a young child who's just learning to talk. They don't understand how to say words and they're trying to tell you something, but they can't. So you have to imagine life like that all the time, not being able to talk to somebody else because they can't speak your language and they can't write because it hasn't been invented yet. Okay, so cuneiform. Cuneiform was the first writing system which used wedge-shaped symbols. The Mesopotamians were also responsible for this. So they were able to figure out how to make a writing system so that way they could communicate with other city-states, communicate with other people that did not speak the same language. And they could also keep records. They could account for, things that they sold during the day or things that happened during their time. They could tell their story and pass it down from generation to generation, much like we do with books and with our records. A scribe is a person paid to read and write. So not everybody in Mesopotamia could read and write. So a scribe was really high up in regards to social classes because they were able to read and write. And so they were in high demand because if you wanted something written down, you needed the scribe to do it. Right? So here's an example of the alphabet that they used. If you would want to, you could definitely sit down and attempt to spell out your name. Not as easy as it looks because there are so many intricate details to it. However, it worked for them and it got us to the writing system that we have today, and it was a start. All right, so now, because of the fact that we have scribes and now there's somebody that's in high demand and, they want to be compensated for what they do, we have to think of the economy and how that had an impact on the economy. So economy is using what you have to get what you want. So in this case, a scribe has the ability to read and write, and they can use that to get what they want from other people. So if they don't have food, they could exchange their service with a farmer for food for their family. That would be called economy. Okay, so economy in ancient times meant trade. So you were trading a good or a service for another good or a service. But economy in modern times, we deal with money. So you're not necessarily trading a good or a service, you're trading a good or a service for money. So if you go to the store and you want to buy a new iPod, you're not going to tell them that you'll babysit their kids for a week and a half. You have to give them money. Okay. Up until this time in Mesopotamia, there was no money. There wasn't coined money. It was, I will give you food if you can provide a different service for me, if you can write this down for me, if you can provide protection for my family. So in Mesopotamia, people used trade to get what they needed or what they wanted, so they had a trade economy. Okay, so there was a lot of things that people could trade. They could trade music and entertainment, they could trade food, they could trade for religious help, they could trade ideas. There was a lot of different things that they were able to trade, so goods, services, ideas, beliefs, technology, culture. So there was a lot to trade. However, what would be really difficult, and as you learned in our activity, it's hard to decide what two things are comparable in worth. What you might think is very valuable and important, somebody else might not see as that valuable or important. So you could be telling somebody that you are going to give them this necklace that you have that is so important to you because it was in your family forever and has a lot of intrinsic meaning to you. However, it might not mean anything to the farmer that you're trying to give it to give you food. So he might only give you an apple for this beautiful necklace that you have. Right, so because of this economy, we have what are called merchants now. So this division of labor allowed for people to start trading, and it created the livelihood of being a merchant. So a person who trades for a living. So since he or she no longer had to focus on being a farmer, they could focus on trading things and bringing back necessary things to either their city, state, or to their family. All right, so why is trade so important in Mesopotamia, and why is trade still important today? And we're also going to talk about the difference between a money economy and a trade economy. So a money economy is an economy based on money. So what we have today is a money economy. We give money for the good or service that we want. So with trade economy, there's no set price. But with the money economy, there is a set price. So as I mentioned before, if you think something is worth a lot but the other person does not, it doesn't matter. But with a money economy, if it is worth $12, it is worth $12. There is no getting around that. Okay, a trade economy could be very unfair. Whereas the money economy helps even things out a little bit. So you know that if your good or service is worth $20, somebody has to give you that $20. They can't tell you otherwise unless you choose that they could do that. Okay. A trade economy is very inconvenient because if you think about it, if you're a farmer and you need to trade for goods or services and you need to trade food, well, now all of a sudden you have to box up all this food or bring a cow, and cows might not be the best animals to walk around and get where from one place to another. It's just very difficult to take all these things that you could trade to the place that you want to trade with. Whereas today, money is very convenient. You put it in your pocket, and now we actually have credit cards where you can just swipe the credit card and then the money comes off of it. Makes it a lot easier. So trade economy definitely allowed the economy to develop and for people to get the things that they needed. Money economy made this much easier. Okay, so the money economy was actually created during Mesopotamian times because they actually created coined money as well. So if you want to talk about another piece of technology that they used, they created the coined money to make it easier to trade. So that way you could say, okay, I will give you this for $3. I will give you this for 3 coins. It was no longer I will trade you food for you to write down all of this information for me. So then because of all of these things, this is where social classes came in. There are different groups in society based on power, wealth, and importance. So again, we talked about a scribe being really high up in the social order because of the fact that they had a lot of power and they could get a lot of wealth because they were very important. They were the few people that could actually read and write, and so they were in high demand. And people would pay to get the things that they wanted written down. All right, so when you look at a social pyramid, on top you have the people that are more wealthy. Okay, so they have more power and they tend to have more importance. And on the bottom you have people with the least power and wealth and importance. So this looks a lot like what we talked about with feudalism, how they had the kings, the nobles, the knights, and the serfs. It's the same idea, it's just not the same names. So in this case, you would have an emperor, and then you could have scribes, and the emperor would be on the top. Your ruler is on the top, and then below that would be your scribes, your priests, anything that they held in high regard. And then below that, you would have merchants and people who made money, a lot of money, and then you would have farmers and slaves. Right? So bringing about coined money really started to differentiate the social classes and say, oh, well, you have lots of money, you have lots of wealth, you must be important, so you would have a lot of power. So all of these things were tied together because of the fact that all these things were being created. It really changed the development of the social classes. All right, so that is all that I have for you today. You will have a short quiz on Edmodo to complete before you come back to class tomorrow. And if you have any questions, make sure to post them to Edmodo so we can go over them in class tomorrow.